productivity, winning strategies, and aligning employer-employee goals. If this sounds like something your business could use more of, then you've come to the right place. The Business Mechanic Show with your host, Vaughn Sigmund. Let Vaughn show you how to develop, improve, and jumpstart your business. So now, please welcome the host of The Business Mechanic, Vaughn Sigmund.
Welcome to the Business Mechanic Show, where we fine-tune the engine of your business success. I'm your host, Vaughn Sigmund, co-founder of Results-Driven Leadership, where companies come to drive improved performance. Today, we're diving deep into a skill that's as essential as anything to a successful business. Every business leader needs this wrench to be successful at whatever level you're at. Critical thinking. Let's break it down. Let's start with a little thought on the detrimental impact of poor critical thinking on leadership and the impact that has on a business. In the realm of leadership, let's face it, the ability to think critically is not just a valuable asset, it's a fundamental necessity. Leaders lacking this skill often make hasty decisions, fall prey to biases. They're easily swayed by emotions rather than logic. And this deficiency can lead to a cascade of poor choices, which not only affects their organization's trajectory, but also erodes their team's trust and confidence, the respect they have for you. And when a leader consistently demonstrates a lack of analytical judgment, it becomes increasingly challenging for team members to place faith in any of the directives that leader puts in place. And over time, this can foster an environment of doubt, skepticism, where employees second-guess leadership. They doubt their decisions. This is completely undermining to the effective deployment of success in your organization. It leads to a lot of inefficiencies and this discord within the organization. And moreover, the absence of critical thinking in leadership can significantly temper one's chances for achieving long-term success, promotion, or if you're a business owner, your business's success. You will be capped out early if your critical thinking skills aren't tuned up. And in today's crazy, wild, dynamic business landscape, you as a leader are frequently confronted with complex challenges. It may be harder now than any time in history, ones that require very nuanced solutions. And without the ability to dissect a problem, consider various perspectives, all the elements that go into making a good decision, anticipate potential outcomes, you as a leader risk making ill-informed decisions and decisions that could have dire consequences on your organization. Even worse, if you're uncomfortable making good decisions, you may not make a decision, which allows a problem or a situation or a challenge to fester and linger and lead on, which requires more and more need for a critical decision as it moves down the road. And also think about, if you're working in an organization, your peers. Maybe if you own a business, your competitors. They are very quick to recognize a leader who operates without the depth in their thought process. And this not only diminishes respect from your peers, your colleagues, but it hinders opportunities for collaboration. It hinders your ability to partner and grow. In essence, you as a leader, your inability or your shortcomings in critical thinking can and will become the Achilles heel of your professional journey. And of course, that's going to stunt your personal and organizational advancement. Let me give you an example of a series, a cascade of examples of poor critical thinking skills. And it's one that I know a fair amount about. It's one I followed very closely. I was loosely associated with this organization, and I stood on the sidelines and watched this happen. And it took better than a decade for this all to erode and fall into a big smoldering pile. But I stood on the sidelines, and it was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. And that's the story of Circuit City. And those of you who have read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, Circuit City back in the 90s was actually cited as one of the great companies in America under different leadership. They changed leadership. And then in Jim Collins' later book, that was written just a few years ago, they were cited again. In his book, How the Mighty Fall. So they went from a great book to how companies screw up and fail. And in How the Mighty Fall, I encourage you to read it because there are some great case studies in there from a business standpoint. I loved reading it because often knowing what not to do is one of the best knowledge bases you can have. Learn from other people's mistakes, and that's what this book is all about. So I'm not making any commission off of selling Jim Collins' book. He doesn't need anybody to help him sell his books, but it's a great book. I encourage you to read it. Circuit City, back to them. If you're not familiar, just in case, some younger folks out there, Circuit City, it was a former electronics retail giant, juggernaut. They were huge. They were the dominant force in the United States when it comes to selling electronics. And they were one of the best performing companies throughout the decades of the 70s, 80s, 90s, into the early 2000s. But then things started eroding. By 2009, the company had filed for bankruptcy and had eventually liquidated all of its assets. Poof, there we're gone. And let's talk about some of the critical decisions that contributed, the factors that contributed to the downfall of Circuit City. Now, in Collins' book, he breaks the downfall of companies into several categories. And he identifies the steps of which they set themselves up for failure. And the first one was hubris, born of success. Circuit City became complacent. They became complacent. I watched this happen. It was very obvious, except for the people running Circuit City. They became very complacent due to their earlier success. Again, they were the juggernaut. They were the 900-pound gorilla. And the company believed that its past victories guaranteed future success. They were too big to fail. And that led to an arrogance that made them resistant to change and to look around themselves and adapt to the evolving retail marketplace. Customers' shopping habits were changing. Circuit City had a very antiquated shopping process that was very cumbersome, but why change? We're the biggest and the best, so they didn't. The second point that Jim Collins makes that's common with each of these companies that failed was an undisciplined pursuit of more. Undisciplined pursuit of more. The company expanded rapidly without a clear strategy. They were just opening as many stores as they possibly could They were very aggressive, and they lost the sight of importance of choosing good real estate in markets that were going to continue to provide them customer growth. And this aggressive expansion that also made Circuit City not as special, had diluted the brand. And because of their size, and they weren't built from an infrastructure standpoint to handle all these locations, they hadn't put that in place. It really strained the resources. The seams were starting to break. The next category that companies fall into when they fail is denial of risk and peril. As competitors like Best Buy began to gain market share because they had a better customer experience, far better. And just for you young folks that never had the honor, the privilege to shop in a Circuit City, they didn't stock a lot of things on shelves. They had a display model, and you took a tag over to a front desk, and they had a warehouse in the back of the store. And they had this conveyor belt that ran from the warehouse out to the checkout stands. You took your little tag up to the front, you gave it to a cashier. The cashier would then tell the people back in the warehouse, hey, we need one of these out here. They'd pull it off the shelf, put it on the conveyor belt, and a few minutes later out would pop, come rolling out through the conveyor belt, the item that you're purchasing. It took several minutes. Think about that in today's world where everything is instant. Best Buy came along, put everything on shelves. So you walk in, see it, like it, pick it up, walk to the front, pay for it, like everything else. Circuit City had a very antiquated approach, and they did not see what a better approach Best Buy was bringing into the market and chose to ignore it. And they were super slow to respond to the rise of online retailers. That was the second part. In the late 90s, early 2000s, online shopping became more and more of the share of a retailer's business. And they ignored it completely. They didn't see it. They didn't adapt to it. So not only the in-store experience, but they had no online game. The next category that everybody falls into, grasping for salvation. So they reached to a point where the bean counters started running the company. In a desperate attempt to turn things around, the company made some radical changes. Looking back on this, I know they wish they hadn't done it, such as laying off its highest paid and most experienced employees, their salespeople. See, when you walked into a Circuit City store, they actually had people who would guide and recommend and help you find exactly what was right for you. And it was these people that drove the decades of success Circuit City had. But all of a sudden, they looked around and said, wow. And this, again, is in the early 2000s. So in relative terms, you have to do the math. These people were making $15, $18 an hour in a world of $5.75 minimum wage. So they're making 3 times, sometimes 4 times what other employees were making. And so that becomes a big old target when I'm trying to cut cost. So they took their best people, took their best brain trust. They took the people who was driving what success they were experiencing, poof, gone. And this decision just made a bad thing even worse, because that was the only last vestige of a competitive edge they had. And it really hurt their reputation too, because that hit the news media. They were really looked down upon for doing what they did. The next category that Collins laid out, capitulation to irrelevance or death. And so once they reach that pinnacle, there's a no turning back point in a company's demise. This happens in teams too, folks. Unable to recover from previous missteps and adapt to the changing retail environment. Circuit City eventually just, there was nothing they could do to change it. And I can give you some other decisions outside of, this was one that everybody just, I scratched my head. Anybody that had any kind of business acumen, another really bad decision in grasping for salvation. Best Buy introduced what's called white goods, appliances, major appliances. And Circuit City had major appliances, but they couldn't compete price per price. So those margins on their, what used to be a big volume, hundreds of millions of dollars for them, they decided to get rid of because they were getting skinny margins on it. Okay. But there's this thing called cash flow in any organization. I would think that a company as big and as experienced as Circuit City would have thought this through, but from the outside, it doesn't look like they did. And what did they replace all this floor space with? CDs and DVDs. So they took $3 and $4 and $5 and $600 retail items and replaced them with $5 and $10 and $15 retail items. So that same square footage in their store produced a fraction of income at about the same margins. Bad business decision. That's one that I've still scratched my head. Who came up with that? In analyzing Circuit City, this serves as a cautionary tale for businesses. You always need to be looking over your shoulder. You need to respect what the competition's doing. You need to be humble. You need to have disciplined growth. And their whole story is just a really strong reminder that even the best, and there's a book full of these, y'all, Blockbuster's another one. It's a great reminder that even the mightiest companies can fall and fail if they fail to recognize and address their vulnerabilities. And very often their vulnerabilities come from a changing market. And you've got to adapt with that. That's critical thinking on a very large scale. Now, let me break down what I think is going to be helpful to anybody that wants to work on their critical thinking skills. Did some research on this. There are multiple elements that go into the process, and it is a process of critical thinking. And let's go through these. And I want you, based on some of the examples I shared, the key points I make of this process, and see where Circuit City failed to utilize all the elements of critical thinking. Now, don't worry about writing any of this down. It's a lot. This whole process, it's a lot. I'll put a link in the show notes right at the very top where you can click on it and download an infographic that contains all this information. It's bulleted, but you'll get it. You're smart, you'll get it. And I created yesterday this infographic just for this podcast. And it incorporates all the things I'm sharing with you today. It's a handy tool. It can be a ready reminder as you're upskilling yourself. Okay, another point. Did you know that critical thinking isn't just a God-given talent? Well, it's not. It can be learned. It can be developed. It takes time. Some develop faster than others, depending on your level of smarts and your willingness to make decisions. And what I like about what I'm sharing today is I can break down a understandable, tangible approach versus it just, as is often believed, just to be a God-given talent. This does not come easily to some, but it can come to most. So let me lay out the layers of the process. Breaks down into some key categories: who, what, where, when, why, and how. Who, what, where, when, why, how. Yep, I bet you've heard those before. Those open-ended questions, they apply to a lot of things, especially in leadership. Let's talk about the who. First up, let's talk about who. When you're thinking through a problem and driving towards a decision, ask the following who question. Who really benefits from it? Everyone from the boardroom to the break room. But you also have to ask, who might find it challenging? Likely it's those who have never been encouraged to question or challenge their beliefs, that are resistant to change. And when we think about the key players in promoting critical thinking, it's our educators, our mentors, and of course, our leaders like you. And in today's society, I believe we're coming up short in helping to teach people how to think. I'm helping you to break down the elements of how to think today, critical thinking. We're really good at teaching them what to think. However, that is not so great in leadership. That just makes them more dependent on you. So let me hit just a couple more bullet points on who. Who is this harmful to? Who makes decisions about this? Who have you heard discuss this? Who would be the best person to consult on this? Who will be the key people in this? Who deserves recognition for this? Those are all the elements that go into just the who part of it. Now let's move on to what. What is critical thinking? The what in critical thinking? It's the ability to evaluate information, make informed decisions, navigate complex situations. What's the best case scenario in the what, when we apply it, is making decisions that drive for a positive outcome. What's going to be effective? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What is another perspective? Have we thought of everything? What is another alternative? What would be a counter argument? What is going to go wrong if we do this? What is the best case scenario if we pull this off perfectly? What is the worst case scenario if we fail at this? What's the most important part of this decision? What's the least important part of this decision? What can we do to make this a positive change? And what is getting in the way of us taking action? Now let's talk about the where. Where do we see critical thinking in action? In our board meetings, strategy sessions, even those water cooler discussions. And when you're thinking about the where of making critical thinking, where would we see this in the real world? What's a comparison for this? Where are similar concepts? What are similar situations? Because it's probably not unique what you're deciding to do. Somebody else has tried this. Where is there the most need for this? Where in the world would this be a problem? Where can we get more information? Where do we go for help with this? Where will this idea take us? And where are the areas for improvement? That's the where part of critical thinking. Now let's talk about the when part. Ask yourself the following when questions. When is the best time? When is it acceptable? When is it unacceptable? When would this benefit our organization? When would this cause a problem? When is the best time to take action? Just went through that scenario today with a company. They needed to, unfortunately, lay off some people. When's the time to do it? Beginning of the day, end of the day, first of the week, end of the week, end of the pay period? When will we know we're successful? When has this played a part in business history? When can we expect this to actually change? And at what point, when should we ask for help? That's the when questions. There's more. The big why. You need to ask the following why questions because it's crucial, especially for us in the business world, because the age of information overload, being able to discern fact from fiction is not just a skill, it's a necessity. So you need to understand the why. You need to make sure you're covering all of your bases. So why is this a problem? Why is this a challenge? Why is this relevant to me? Why is it relevant to my employees? Why is this the best scenario? Why might this be the worst scenario? What's going to go wrong? That's often not considered. Why are people influenced by this? Why do people like this? Why should people know about this? Do we need to be more transparent? Why has this been this way for so long? What internally has kept us this way? Why have we allowed this to happen? And why is there a need for this today? And the last one, how? The how of critical thinking skills. Because we need to continuously educate ourselves, challenging our biases about how to approach things, and being very open to different perspectives and collaboration. So here's some how questions. How is this similar to? Fill in the blank. How does this disrupt things? How do we know the truth about this? How do we know this is really the way? How will we approach this safely? How does this benefit us? How does it benefit others? How might this harm us? How do we see this in the future? What's it going to lead to? What's the long-term consequences of this? And how can we change this? How can we change this for the good? Who, what, when, where, how, why? Now, I'm going to give you a case study, another example, where critical thinking turned an iconic company that was almost dead. They had reached the kind of the middle to the end of Collins's list of how companies fail. And they've gone from almost failure to back to a vibrant household name once again. And the name of that company, Lego. Lego, which for as long as I can remember, as long as I've been on this planet, has been an iconic toy brick company. Put bricks together, build things. And Lego is a shiny example of how critical thinking and leadership can turn a company around. Completely changed its fortunes. In fact, it was founded in 1932, and it had decades of success in its first several decades. However, with the age of the internet, online gaming, during the early 2000s, this company was on the brink of bankruptcy because they were analog and everything else had gone digital. And they were facing this very stiff competition for the purchase of children's games and entertainment with video games, high-tech toys. And in their scramble to get better, they launched some really bad products, very unsuccessful products. And their future in the early 2000s was bleak. Enter Jorgen Vig Knudstrup. Don't ask me to say that again. He took over as the CEO in 2004, changed one person who changed the course of this organization. Because Knudstrup comes in, unlike his predecessors, he didn't have a history with the company. He wasn't stuck in the old, this is the way we've always done things. And this allowed him to view Lego's challenges with a fresh set of eyes. And one of the first moves was to employ some very critical thinking to analyze his company's core strengths and to embrace the company's weaknesses. And he initiated through a review of the company's operations, their products, their markets. He recognized that while diversification into various product lines seemed like a good idea, it had spread the company way too thin. They needed to get back to their core. Many of these products, like theme parks and clothing lines, were not aligned with Lego's core competency. Building toys, bricks. And he made the tough decision to divest many of those non-core assets. Furthermore, he and his team engaged in a very deep research into consumers' thoughts and needs. He needed to understand what kids thought and what these kids' parents truly valued about Lego. Because in the end, it's the kids and the parents are going to vote for their success or not, vote with their wallets. And during this discovery, they uncovered that while digital entertainment was a keen competitor, it could also be an ally. What? And this insight, this critical thinking insight, led to the development of successful video games based on Lego themes. And they bridged the physical analog and the digital play together. And another critical decision was to engage with Lego's passionate adult fan base. Nostalgia. They had many thousands, millions of influencers called parents because of the value these brand ambassadors brought to the organization. Let's play on that. That's a strength. And that led to the creation of advanced building sets and collaborative projects with adults. And under his leadership, they went through a remarkable transformation. In fact, by 2015, they had surpassed Mattel to become the world's largest toy company in the terms of revenue. And this story, their success story, failure to success, underscores the importance of critical thinking. That CEO went through the who, what, where, what, why, how, when. He went through all that. And he was very objective. He assessed the situation, understood what the customer wanted, not what they've been doing forever, but redefined, reorganized the company to fit what the customer wanted. And he focused on his core strengths, brought his company back to its core. And again, if you want these tools I'm talking about, this free infographic, just click on the link. It's a PDF. You can download it. It's yours. Enjoy. If you have any questions, reach out. So let me start wrapping this up. Critical thinking goes without saying, is an invaluable skill that allows us all as leaders to navigate the complexity of leading companies and teams. And by asking the right questions and being open to different perspectives, we can make more informed decisions. We can understand complex issues, and we can engage in meaningful discussions. Collaboration is often key to this. And whether you're just beginning your business career or you're much further down the road, cultivating your critical thinking skills, no doubt, serve you well in all areas of life. So whether you're a seasoned CEO or just starting out in the business world, cultivating your critical thinking skills will set you on a path to success. Well, that's a wrap on another episode of the Business Mechanic Show. If today's content resonates with you, then you're going to love what we have to offer. For those of you who are ready to take your business or personal career to the next level, we have an array of training and coaching services tailored just for you. From performance coaching designed to enhance your potential, to executive coaching that guides leaders to steer their ships towards greater success. Are you in sales management or looking to fortify your leadership acumen? Dive into our sales management training and coaching. Not only will it sharpen your strategies, but it will also provide you an ROI that's undeniable. Remember, the best investment you can make is in yourself and your team. For those seeking flexible learning options, we're excited to share our online and in-person management leadership classes. These aren't just your typical courses. They are meticulously crafted, ensuring that they align with your unique needs and aspirations. And the best part, prices start at just $47 per month, making top-tier coaching and training accessible for everyone. Your growth, both personally and professionally, can have a ripple effect, the one I call the transformational triangle of change. The skills you learn, the perspectives you gain, and the efficiencies you create can translate into increased revenues, more cohesive teams, and an enriched company culture. So why wait? The potential ROI on this investment isn't just in dollars, it's in the progressive future you're carving out for yourself and your organization. Thanks once again for tuning in, and remember, every business needs a tune-up every now and then. Let the Business Mechanic Show be your guide. Check out our website, rdltraining.com, to discover more details on our programs and coaches. We have a link in the show notes to guide you there. Until next time, we're out of here.